All right. Of all the videos that I've ever made, this one might end up being like, I don't, one of the spiciest. I hope that all of you don't just like get up and unsubscribe thinking that I'm going to turn into like a preachy vegan or whatever else. I mean, if you're already watching me and you're like, you seem very preachy about trans issues and everything else, I don't see why this one would be like the final straw or whatever. But a lot of people, when I bring up veganism, some of them cringe and they're like, oh God, here we go. And to those people, I'm like, fuck yes, here we go. Veganism is awesome. And that is going to be the subject of this video because I am in fact a vegan. And unlike the path that most vegans have taken, where they ended up reading something like Peter Singer's Animal Liberation, which I have read that book. And it's, if you're not a vegan, I highly suggest you go and you read that book. Instead, I just want to talk about veganism in general and why I'm a vegan and why I feel like more people ought to be vegans. So let's just like take the first point of this, in which case I would say a reduction of animal suffering. Now, I've heard some people say that the reduction in animal suffering argument is not necessarily a good one. And they'll say that, oh, well, because it leads to a slippery slope where people could just say, how much is enough? So for instance, if I say that I want to reduce animal suffering, so we should stop eating cows and we should stop eating pigs. Then someone will say, okay, well, what about like other like sentient creatures? And I say, okay, how about other like sapient and no more sentient creatures? And they say, okay, but you said animal harm. So you're talking like cosmetic supplies and animal testing. And I say, yeah, we should reduce that too. And they'll say, well, what about vaccines or whatever? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, we should probably stop that too, because there's been no vaccines, not even one, that we got breakthroughs with animal testing. It just doesn't work that way. And then you could say, well, what about farming, like spraying pesticides and stuff like that? What if we like kill mice out in the fields, like while we're harvesting and stuff like that? And then I'm like, well, I guess like I can't really answer that one. And they'll say, well, that's the gotcha. And that's the slippery slope that you went down. And therefore, arguing that we should just do harm reduction is not a good argument. I've heard other vegans say that this is not a good argument, but I've heard others use it. And I'll just give you my perspective on this. So I think that the reducing animal harm or reducing animal suffering specifically, I think that is one of the most crucial like arguments here. I think it is absolutely a good argument. It's very important. And one of the reasons why is because that's the ultimate goal of veganism is harming, or oh my gosh, is reducing animal harm. That's it. So it's like, if you have your end goal is to have no animal suffering, or at least to have minimized it as much as possible. So like everybody is like a vegan or whatever. I mean, if that's your goal, then that's what you're doing. I don't think it's fair if you say, oh, well, I got about it through some other means, like arguing like morality or whatever, and the morality of causing other beings to suffer. I don't care. Whatever strategies that you use rhetorically or just appealing to the sensibilities of other people, the result is still the same. It's a reduction in animal harm. And that's how I'm defining it. So whenever you hear me talk about a reduction in animal harm, I think it encompasses all the different areas that vegans talk about. And I think that for a start, that we ought to just as much as we can convince other people to reduce their meat consumption. And so it's like, eat less, cows, eat less pigs, eat less, as much as we can, because factory farming right now is like unbelievably brutal, unbelievably cruel. And there are like, we kill billions, and that's with a B, billions of animals every single year, just so that we can have Burger King or McDonald's or whatever else, when you could in fact make tons of delicious food that is very nutritious at your house. You do not have to go, buy these burgers, or whatever else. And first and foremost, I think like it's undeniable if you look up factory farming or any of the information about it, that is an incredibly cruel industry that deserves to have been an input to it yesterday. So moving on from there, if people say like, well, what about like small farms or free range or whatever else? I mean, the problem there is like, even though it's not factory farming, you still got those animals from somewhere. Those animals are still like eventually going to stop laying eggs for you, or they're going to like stop producing milk or whatever. you still have to like pull the calf away from its mother in order to, make the heifer produce milk. You are still also taking the eggs from the chickens, which can cause them some emotional suffering. And even if you wait for the chickens to walk away and they leave the eggs and then you take the eggs, there's still the problem that eventually those chickens are going to stop laying eggs. And then what happens to them? And the fact that if you, even if you have like farms that only have egg laying chickens, that means that the male chickens all will have already been exterminated, just half of them killed right off the top, if all you wanted was the egg laying hens. So that doesn't actually, while it does reduce some of it, it does not reduce it like near enough to the extent that I think like relatively makes a difference. So that's the first argument that I would say is animal harm reduction. The second argument is reducing this animal harm also would help our climate incredibly. And I know it's a meme that conservatives say, oh, well, vegans just want to ban cow farts or something like that. And it's all like a big, laugh, and everybody has a good time with it. The thing is, like, if you laugh at this point, I really want you to go and do the research on this. If you feel like you can prove me wrong with data that the methane produced by this industry does not contribute significantly to climate change, I want that data, because all the research that I've done, all the documentaries that I've seen, all of them point to cattle as being the primary source of pollution on the planet. We are literally killing the planet by our desire to eat the flesh of other animals. And it's not like there aren't plant-based alternatives, which I'll cover in the next section. But there's no reason for us to eat or harvest as many cows as we do right now. There's besides the industry being cruel, it actively harms our environment and ultimately harms us. And if you're a conservative and you have your kids and you're like, I want my kids to grow up in a world where they can still pursue their dreams or live the best life that they can, then I don't see why this is a joke to you. Now, some of these people, I understand. I mean, they think like COVID is a joke. So it's like trying to reach them on climate change is kind of hard, but I think it's undeniable that every year our climate gets hotter and hotter, and we see more and more extreme weather phenomenon every year. Climate change is undeniable. Then I know that there was the UK paper released not too long ago where all these different climate scientists signed on to it, pointing out how drastic or how far red we are into the danger when it comes to climate change. I feel like if we just gave up eating animals, that alone would go so far into helping prevent further damage to our climate. And so that is that's the second argument that I would use. So the first one is animal harm reduction. The second one is climate change. The third one I would say is personal health reasons. So vegans, like right off the top, have a like almost 30% reduced chance of having heart disease or heart attacks. And the number one killer in the United States right now is heart disease. And it's like, so it's literally the diet of eating animal flesh that's clogging your arteries. That's every time that, you're like, go to the doctor and the doctor tells you need to lower your cholesterol or whatever else. Besides being genetically predispositioned to having heart attacks, it's undeniable the damage that eating a like meat heavy diet. I mean, we eat like way more meat than is necessary to get the protein needs that we need. That is actively killing us, arguably as much as the climate change. It's just that climate change is like wrecking the whole planet, and that cholesterol and a lot of the like more unhealthy side effects from these animals are affecting our own bodies. And by the way, not only is it bad for your health, but whenever you see something like it was a E. coli breakout and it was making crops unsafe to eat or whatever, a lot of the infections, the bacterial infections, came from cattle that were nearby, because all those cattle are producing, I mean, tons and tons and tons of feces. And if it isn't used as manure or sold off, they have to pile it somewhere. So it's like literally like giant mountains of poop right next to these facilities where they are processing these animals. or the animals are being kept. The runoff from rain and stuff on all that fecal matter can run off into nearby streams, which then ends up getting like polluting other crops or whatever else. We also have like disease and bacteria. I mean, like COVID-19, COVID came from bats. We also have the H1N1, which came from eating pigs. And then, of course, there's also like mad cow disease. There are tons of zoological diseases that end up affecting us as well as affecting the animals. And I don't see why, with the risk being so high of infection to us, destruction of our environment, and the incredible amount of suffering that is unnecessarily caused to these animals, that wouldn't at least give you pause. Now you might say, Zoe, that sounds like you're talking like this is a nirvana fallacy. You want this perfect utopia where no animals are being harmed, at least as minimized as possible, because I do think that if we were eating nothing but agriculture, I can admit that doesn't necessarily work out because, yeah, sure, some mice might get like ground up by harvesters. We're trying to get our grains or whatever else. We could put in like we could install around our farms and facilities things to dissuade those mice from getting in there. There are options that we have. And I'm not saying that everything is going to be absolutely perfect or it's not worth doing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's no reason that with recognizing all the harm that is being done to ourselves, to the planet, to the animals themselves, there's no reason why we can't just give up meat. Just change your diet. It's not that hard. Now, on one hand, I understand that you're saying, well, hamburgers are delicious, or you like ribs or whatever else. You might be surprised the amount of plant-based alternatives that will really give you that same flavor profile that you're looking for. And it won't kill you and give you heart disease or ruin the planet. It's just, ultimately, this comes down to humanity's like hedonistic desires. It really does. And it's like, I know a lot of people listening to this might be like, you're not going to want to hear me say this. And it might offend you that I'm suggesting that you change your diet or whatever else. Because you're like, well, who am I to tell you anything? All that is your, that's between you and your doctor or whatever else. And granted, your health is between you and your doctor. But I don't see why this isn't something that you wouldn't at least consider. And there are tons of other vegans that you can watch out there. There's Earthling Ed. There's Cosmic Skeptic. There is Lewis of Perspective Philosophy. And you can get a very robust idea of like the philosophical argumentation around it. The more persuasive, what I think is at least as persuasive as why like you should just try to reduce animal suffering. And even if you only did it just for yourself or your own improved health, you should do it like for that. Either way, I still think like it is better to be vegan even then. And if you're saying like, well, I'm a vegetarian or I'm mostly a vegetarian. Oh, okay. Well, just stop eating the dairy products too. Stop eating the cheese. Like there are alternatives to that too. There's like the Silk brand soy milk, delicious. And the almond milk, that stuff is really good too. And as far as cheeses go, I want to say it's like the Chow brand. That stuff is delicious. I had grilled cheese sandwiches like yesterday for my lunch, and they were delectable. It's not, I like some people feel like this is like very unreasonable or that vegans are just very loud and preachy and just won't shut the hell up. I've been a vegan for over a year. I've not made like a single video. I think I've mentioned it in my videos before where like I'll say the vegans are right or something. And hopefully if you caught that coding, then you knew that I was a vegan before now. But if not, then you know. I'm not trying to be an asshole about this. And I'm not going to make every single video from this point forward all about veganism. I'll still talk about responding to other streamers and talk about LGBT issues and atheism and this sort of stuff, because I do care about those things as well. It's just that veganism, in my opinion, was something that was so easy for me to start doing, and makes such an impact on markets, on animal welfare, and my own health. And the thing is, like, my family around me was pretty skeptical when I first started doing it. But then my spouse started doing it like shortly afterward, because they were like, hey, this food is very delicious. And they also cared about animal suffering. Our family, over time of eating with us, as we have prepared different vegan dishes and opened their eyes to like whole new flavor profiles that they like never even realized was possible with plant-based foods, they have now also started eating more and more and more vegetables, and the amount of meat that they bring home has lessened substantially. Now, I wish that they were all the way there, but it's like there are certain considerations to take with vegan diets, like are you capable of preparing the food and this sort of stuff? And I think like for anybody that thinks about starting a new diet, there might be some concerns. You're like, well, I don't cook very well or whatever else. Don't worry, there's vegan options for you. If you're one of these people that live out of a freezer and you want to go to the store and just buy like corn dogs or something and heat them up in the microwave, there are literally vegan options for that as well. And plenty of people think that you cannot be athletic or you can't do sports and also be vegan. That's not true. I literally spent the last couple of days like digging a like 70-foot trench 3 feet deep outside of my house. And it's like I have no less energy to get up and go and to exercise or whatever else being vegan than I was before. So it's like that's where my positions are. I'm not going to get into like really spicy takes right now because I think that people, so like, all right, maybe y'all are familiar with like the vegan teacher. And I think people like the vegan teacher mean well, and she's very passionate about her messaging and everything else. And maybe that way of like harassing people or like being like very pointed and being like, you should know better or whatever else, or making like, drawing like very drastic, analogies and stuff like, showing like, comparing, like factory farming to human slavery or whatever else, that puts a lot of people off. Because people have a knee-jerk reaction to be like, how dare you basically like insinuate that we are all animals. We are. So it's like, I don't even think that necessarily she's awful. It's just that if you are not a vegan and and she approaches you with arguments like this, they are so harsh sometimes that it really turns people off, especially if they feel like you cannot philosophically justify why you're being so passionate about this. What I would say is, look up vegan literature and do your own research as far as like factory farming goes. And I know that's square quotes, a do your own research kind of thing. That I mean it in the literal sense. Look at the data, look at the conditions of these farms, look at the conditions of these animals. I think if you knew the way that these animals were treated and the diseases and stuff, especially veal. Look up the way that veal is raised and treated and everything those animals go through. I think if you explored some of that, it might actually like not necessarily change your mind on the spot, but start moving you in that direction to realize like, wow, we are doing so much damage to this planet. We are risking our health through like different diseases. I mean, we got lucky with COVID. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been more deadly. And there is something that we can do about this stuff. And that is simply going vegan. And the more that people buy vegan foods and the more that people invest in vegan products, I mean, we live in a capitalist society. They will make more vegan stuff. And I remember like years ago, the only type of vegan stuff that I would ever see is like flat out vegetables. And now you can go and you can buy like vegan pre-made meals and this kind of stuff. Plus there's lots of food that's like accidentally vegan, like certain potato chips and stuff like that. There's like plenty of junk food that if you just sit around eating Doritos and stuff, playing your video games, you could easily find vegan versions of all of that same food. And you could live a healthier lifestyle, but also, having it on your conscience that you know that you are not contributing to animal suffering, and that you're also doing your part to also help reduce climate change at the same time. And if somebody tries to point out to you that, oh, well, I don't see why you're so worried about like animals and veganism when all these other problems are going on at the same time. I said it before, and I'll point this out every single time whenever people say stuff like that. That's a flat out nirvana fallacy. There's no reason why we cannot address multiple issues at the same time. And just like I'm passionate about secularism, and I'm passionate definitely about trans issues, I would say that I'm also passionate about veganism. And as of right now, this intends to be my one and only video probably that I make on veganism. I say probably because I don't know. Maybe I'll end up talking to other vegan creators at some point in time. But right now, this is where my mindset is. And like I said at the beginning, if you've somehow missed or gotten the wrong impression throughout this video, I am myself a vegan, and I would support anybody else going that route, especially if you're a vegetarian. I'd say you're doing good. That's great. Now just go a little bit further. And if you're a meat eater and you refuse to entertain veganism at all, I would be curious as to why, without just appealing to hedonism. And even if you want to appeal to hedonism, I think it would be worth to ask you, like, well, don't you care about the environment? Don't you care about, like, the world that will be left for your kids? Aren't you worried about your own health as far as, like, how much cholesterol that you're eating, besides just the animals? Oh, well. Those are my thoughts for now on this subject. Like I said, hopefully not everyone's like, oh God, unsubscribe. But I will see you in the next video.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me.